Hello, everybody. Another surf report. Everybody ready? Man, I got to tell you, I'm a little bit sluggish today. As I look out the window, torrential rain earlier, got flooding in the back. It's a mild flooding. It's nothing disastrous, but sort of has me feeling a little melancholy today. And but we're gonna do some surfing. Whoops, there we go. How was everybody's disruption this week? Man, if you're not on Telegram, I highly encourage you to go to the link down below in the description is the Telegram. Sign up for that. I try to pull out some of the things that go along with the surf report. So last week, all sorts of disruptions, both good and bad disruptions to the narrative, disruptions to maybe some things that we think are going down or whatever. But I think we all know that we're living in that time where everything's getting disrupted. It's sort of the Aquarian age. And so anyway, we can probably expect more disruption going forward. But this week in particular is sort of a pause and reflect influence this week. And this is the summary slide. So what we're doing for all you newbies here is we're going to be looking for the triangulation, the main influence. And that's going to be different than what we're going to be talking about later in the show, which is going to be the solution. So as the influence goes, we're looking for the triangulation, and these are very overlaid upon each other. So high, oops, I forgot to change the congruency score. I'd say that's higher than 0.85. And congruency meaning that they're all overlaid with each other. From the astrology, there's a lot of chaotic energy here. Sun and Uranus, so shaking things up with squares. Mercury and Venus together. By the way, Mercury going into Gemini here pretty soon. We have a Taurus stellium. We're going to talk about how the astrology this week is enough to cover both the influence and the solution. So there's a lot there. That's why this circle is the biggest circle, the purple circle. And then the Dreambot is what we'll cover first. And this is the collective unconscious. And it's sort of having a lot of negativity, surprise, a lot of negative feelings, very dreaminess, and remembering things. So that's going to show us that we need to look at the South Node in the astrology, and we'll cover that. And the moon will be going over the South Node. That'll make some interesting aspects. And then the I-Ching, which is the blue circle, talks about limits. I don't know about this connections thing, but it's more about limits, maybe with boundaries. If you put limits and connections together, according to the I-Ching, I think you get boundaries. And this week, according to the I-Ching, it's the influence of having to figure out what's too much social or what's too much networking and how much aloneness do I need to have. And so this whole idea of pause and reflect is the influence. What that means is you're probably going to feel like maybe isolating a little bit more or going internal to one's own mind to maybe assimilate what's happening. There could be a lot of factors in this feeling, but the sensation is I need time to process. I need time to think and reflect. And maybe there might be this past stuff bubbling up, and I'll talk about that in the astrology. But anyway, does that set the groundwork sufficiently? Let's go ahead and get started next. Welcome. And before we talk about the Dreambot, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all of you and the comments. Keep them streaming. I think it is making an impact on who gets to see the surf reports. So anyway, here's the collective unconscious, aka the Dreambot. Number one word in people's dreams over the last 24 hours is the word star. I find that very interesting. That could be multiple meanings. But as you know, I like to take the one meaning that's combined best with all the rest of the words. And what we have is dream and dreaminess and strange and fantasy stuff. So dream world, You got the word dream in there twice. That's not unusual, but it's not all the time. So that's important that we have sort of a dreaminess. Then in the blue arrows, we have this very negative thing, sad, annoyed, forgotten, toilet, missing. A lot of these things can be positive, like ended sort of denotes a negativity, but it's not always negative. I mean, ending of suffering is a wonderful thing. So anyway, that's why it's dashed. But then we have remembering, and that's only 3 items, but I put this down because it has everything to do with Mercury and the South Node. But those two are not connected this week, by the way. But there's definitely this thinking, but mostly remembering. This is unusual. Remembering and remember are both in this run and above the 50 percentile. So that's interesting. All right, ready? That's enough of that. Let's get into the astrology. And I need to bump this up. Forgot to bring it down. As you know, we're leaving April this CIRF week. By the way, the CIRF week is from the 29th of April to the 6th of May, or the 5th of May. Can't remember. And I didn't even change this slide. Bad on me. Wow. All right. So the astrology, we have Pluto going into retrograde this week, or has already happened, I think yesterday or the day prior. Pluto, is a very subconscious, deeply subconscious planet or influence anyway, but can make a big change in one's life, upheaval. This retrograde period might bring in some special powers from the past, or some talent from the past, or maybe some transformation from the past. So be looking for that. That can be your power. Anything from the past, which is what I think the Dreambot is implying, can be your power, or it can be your attack. It can attack you depending on what your perception is. So all of these reds are actually going to combine this week to have another pretty climactic square week, meaning tension and pressure and conflict, internal conflict. We'll talk all about that, but that's at a climax this week. And then we'll go into May. And I got all the big things ironed out here for the future of May. So I'll give you a little brief overview of what's happening later in May. I've been talking about this one. Let me get my highlighter out. So Saturn goes into retrograde, and that actually keeps this square, Saturn square Uranus, that I've been talking about, seemed like forever. That's what keeps that square alive for a lot longer. And I think it goes all the way out into the next year, the next calendar year. Then you've got Jupiter that's going to be going into Pisces. You've got Venus goes into Gemini. This is later in May. You've got Mercury retrograde at the end, and the Sun obviously going into Gemini at some point. We've got a couple more squares here. Sun, square, Saturn that we'll talk about. So a lot of squares, a lot of pressure this week. Did I mention Mercury going into Gemini? That's returning home. Mercury's home. Ruler of Gemini. So let's get started. Thursday, the 29th. We continue with the stellium. We have the Sun, Uranus together. That's 1 degree away. So at the early part of this week, we have basically two pairs. You can see that Venus and Uranus are 8 degrees away. So that's sort of the cutoff between conjunctions. So I'm going to call that 2 separate conjunctions. One of them is Sun and Uranus. The other is Mercury and Venus. And they both have squares to them. So all of the planets, all the conjunctions, all the stellium in Taurus is conflicted this week. 2 of those, the biggest 2 that I think is going to impact our psyche, is the Sun and Uranus. Uranus could be brilliant insight, or it could be massive change to the ego. So you could have, with the Sun in Taurus is a very practical sense of ego and value oriented. And so that concept, that archetype can get really boggled up or changed or shifted in some way with Uranus. But not just that, it's squared, it's pressured, it's conflicted with Saturn, the way things have always been. But this status quo, Saturn, is in Aquarius, and so it abides by those rules. And we see Saturn through that lens. And so status quo is changing. It's freedom, more freedom oriented. No matter what you're reading on the news, it is much more freedom oriented. And that's just the way it is. And this pressure might feel like it wants to stay the same, because that's what Saturn does. It sets limits. It's more of the same. It's more of the foundation. Gets down to the heart of the matter, but in reality, Uranus doesn't care. It wants to change things up, and the sun brings a lot of yang energy into this, and so might highlight some insight and ingenuity into Uranus. Uranus is also technology, and so there's a lot of technology that is pressured, conflicted, friction, might be topsy-turvy here. And the fact that sun can be a very bright entity, is a bright entity, even in the archetype sense, it can really shine some light on technology. That could be an interesting concept. Then you've got, let's see here, what I have. You got so much, and a lot of this carries all the way through the week. So let's cover most of them here. We've got the sextiles, as you know. Sextiles cover the opportunities, offer opportunities. And this one, Mercury and Venus together is sort of a relational mind. And that relational, logical, practical mind has an opportunity with dreams. And remember when I talked about the moon going over the south node? That's the first day of the week. That's Thursday. And on Thursday, it could be really emotional stuff from the past. South node, past stuff over Sagittarius, in Sagittarius. So some maybe past journeys and an emotional memory from the past can conflict. And this could combine together, maybe even nightmares, as you get into Neptune, combined with the past, maybe the more frightening stuff, or what are the biggest emotions that you have from the past? Normally, those are the big traumas, the sort of negative emotions. So that's why I'm saying when the past comes in, but that's not guaranteed on all of us. The past emotional junk, the biggest emotional stuff might be positive reflections. So you might have really great dreams, but this square sort of implies sort of a conflicted thing, which brings our energy down. It wastes energy. It's draining. I wouldn't be surprised if everyone's sleeping a little bit longer or needing longer sleep period on Thursday evening, or even Wednesday. If you're seeing this on Wednesday, just see if I'm correct. I'm guessing that this square here with the moon, in between the moon and Neptune, might be causing us to need a little bit more sleep quantity, and obviously better sleep quality is always better too. Next issue, Mercury trine Pluto. This one hangs out with us for a while. Mercury, one of the faster moving planets though. It's practical thoughts, that's Mercury, with Pluto, powerful Capricorn goals. So powerful goals or deeply subconscious goals. That's a hard one. That's a tough one, but it's a nice energetic layout. Trine is easy energy back and forth. They're both in earth signs. So very earthy, very practical thoughts, practical goals. So that should represent some pretty good energy for you to at least get some things done and think in the right way. And then there's those dream opportunities that I was trying to mention earlier with Mercury and Neptune. Those are opportunities. So figure out how your practical thoughts can be benefited by some Neptune dreams that may or may not be conflicted or pressured from your longer sleep period, because the moon's over the south node, generating up some old past memories. Anyway, there's a lot there, and a lot hangs out through the rest of the week. On Friday the 30th, April 30th, the Sun and Uranus go exact conjunction, and they are also parallel with each other. So it's a direct place in the sky is where they're going to appear from Earth's standpoint. And so that makes this even more magical, that ego, everything I talked about before, but the ego, the insights, potential ingenuity, insights, change, ego change, how you sense your self-worth, the Taurus part, self is Sun, Taurus, worth potentially. So self-worth is maybe a change here. Pressured to have to come up with something because Saturn throws you a curveball. And these two are fighting it out. Saturn wants to keep things the same. Uranus wants to change things. And Uranus is squared up, so hard energy. It's not easy energy coming back to my home of Aquarius. And I say my home because my ruler, my sun sign is Aquarius and Uranus. So the ancient ruler of Aquarius, incidentally, is Saturn. So consider that. Saturn's ruling it, wants to keep things more the same. Uranus is conflicted away from home, away from what it rules. But that could be a good thing. It really puts a lot of pressure on it, and it just can't sustain itself, and boom, it all falls apart. Lid pops off, and change ensues. Now we've got a double trine, so that's even more positive there with Pluto. And then the moon. I don't normally talk about the moon here every day, but I am today. This is a perfect, goes exact opposition in the morning on April 30th. You got the moon opposed Mars. And what's interesting here is, again, moon is an opposition away from its home of Cancer. So nurturing, but it's a goal-oriented nurture. And ironically, Mars is more of a goal-oriented person or entity, and he's in a fall because he's in that deep water of Cancer. And so it's more of like a nurturing fight. That would be more of a passive aggression, passive aggressive on the one hand, and goal-oriented nurturing, whatever the heck that means. Nurturing versus fighting, but on the opposite sides of where they probably are best at. Okay, now we get into Saturday. Look at this. This is, enjoy this. This is very easy day, May 1st. There's new energy just because it's a new calendar month, but also there's not quite so many squares, same amount of squares, but easy energy is deep because the moon's going in here and hits up 3 or 4 of these on the same day. And then it's going to go over Pluto. So very easy but earthy, practical energy. Great day to just hang out in the real world, out in nature maybe. If you can float down a stream, this would be a wonderful day to do that. Just enjoying yourself. Your emotions are going to want to probably get stuff done and whatnot. Yeah, you can. But you got your Mars in a fall. So that's hard to get stuff done there. And you've got all the stellium in squares over to Saturn. So that's sort of conflicted. Might be best just sort of hang out on Saturday, May 1st. Sunday the 2nd, now you see the deterioration of these trines, mainly because the moon is we're part of that trine. And now what you're left with is that conflict that we've been talking about. The only one we haven't discussed is the Mercury squared up to Jupiter. And Jupiter having its last few days of Aquarius. And I think it's going to go into retrograde, but now I can't remember. And it might be in May. I think it does. I think it goes into retrograde. Let me check real quick. We'll come back to Sunday. So Jupiter. Nope, I was wrong. Jupiter's not going retrograde. So let's go back to Sunday. Sorry about that. I should have had that planned out before, but I had forgotten. So Jupiter says its last few days in Aquarius, and it's squared. So there's this lack of optimism, or it's harder to think about optimism and wisdom and stuff because it's squared off to your rational thoughts and your very experiential relationships. The relationships want to experience each other. And this is a really nice combination, by the way, with Mercury and Venus together in Taurus. And but unfortunately it's squared to what feels good, what feels wise, what, long distance travel may not be the best option here for the relationships. Maybe, I don't know, if you've already got a vacation planned, whatever. I would focus more on the inner power, and that can travel. That can experience. But if you're planning something for this weekend, maybe not. I'd hold off on long distance travel and just more focus on the practicality of things, the earth signs. And I only say this because Jupiter is part of that long distance travel archetype as well. Doesn't mean you can't long distance travel. It just means you might have run into some problems. Monday, the 3rd. Tension's going to peak. A couple things are happening. Later in the day, Mercury is going to go into Gemini, and I have a slide for that here. But at the same time, the moon's creating a lot more squares, so it's very conflicted, and you've only got basically one or one and a half trine energies here, easy energy. So the ease goes down, the conflicted goes up. That's May 3rd. That's a Monday. And Mercury's going to go into Gemini. Watch this. I include this because Gemini is a big part of my chart as well. And I've got I can't get rid of the writings here, but there's Mercury. It's at exact Gemini. It's going into 0 degrees Gemini, right on the cusp at 9:50 p.m. That's Central Daylight Savings Time. And unfortunately, Gemini is going into another energy. He's returning home, by the way, going home, and that's going to really bring, particularly for our Geminis, a lot of sense of ease. Just that alone. However, it is a change. It represents a change from Taurus into Gemini, so it's a change. Plus, all this squared energy that we've been talking about is at a climax. And so even rational minds can be conflicted, even though Mercury's returning home to Gemini. And heading a little bit here in a little bit, we'll exit out the squares, but hit up the North Node. So it'll be future-oriented logic, but that's for next CIRF report. On Tuesday, the 4th, we have a continuation of the squares and the same planets in play. You really only have Uranus, Sun, and Venus now in Taurus, as Mercury is now in Gemini. It's you still have this trine now. It's just with Venus and Pluto. So you get the inner power now with your relationships. That's the only easy energy in this chart is your Taurus Venus with Capricorn Pluto. And it can be very empowering, but it could also be easily transforming. So this might be a great time to transform relationships or one of your relationships. Venus also has that remainder of sextile, uninhibited sextile to Neptune, meaning that it's just an opportunity and you can seize it. And that's about it there. And then Wednesday, Cinco de Mayo. Now Venus is going to go. Wait a second. I'm not sure why I put Venus into Taurus. She still has roughly 4 degrees left. And I'm not sure why I put that down there. That's not happening until the next surf week. But for now, enjoy Venus and Taurus. Not sure why I did that. But Uranus has 2 sextiles to it, so there's a lot of opportunity for change. And that's going to feed into this conflict here of Saturn with the square. So keep that in mind. Now, going into the I-Ching, April 29th through the 5th, we have the I-Ching of hexagram 60. Let's turn this off. We have water over lake because when you put this change in, it becomes lake over lake. And does anybody know what lake over lake is? Well, you're about to find out. But the first one is the influence. The next one will be the solution. So the influence is limits. This is an interesting one because as I read this description, you're going to feel like it's more action-based, like it should be a behavior. But influences aren't behaviors. You might be seeing other people doing this, and that's setting limits. So limits are necessary to channel energy, guide purpose, and lend direction to life. Constant swimming in a sea of boundless opportunity leads to exhaustion. A key to a successful life is to select your limits consciously and carefully, to be discriminating in the setting of personal boundaries. So it's just like boundary making. And then line 4 says the measure by which to evaluate self-imposed limitations is this. Do they save and restore energy, or do they dissipate it? Okay. So we have these rules and laws that we sort of live by day in and day out, some subconscious, some conscious. Are they helping us or are they hurting us? And then vain struggles with artificial limitations are best redirected quickly so that the true goal can be kept in sight. Easy does it. So that sounds more like a behavior. It sounds more like a solution. The reason why I'm saying this, when we get to the solution, it is not this. I want to hammer this home. This is not saying that you should be creating limits this week. It's saying that you're going to feel the need to create limits, but the solution is something else. So let's go to it. We have the solution. Let's do our sponsorship slide 1 second before we return. Hang on. Interzention.com for mental health, astrological readings, human design readings, hypnotherapy. Go to interzention.com. All right, here's the solution. 58, lake over lake, is joy. Now this more sounds like the influence, but it's not. We got to pull out the behaviors from this description. And you may not feel joy this week, but you're supposed to bring joy to the world. All right. Joy comes into the world through gentle means, but springs from a solid sense of self. The power of joy should not be underestimated. The enjoyment of learning and discovery, for example, has served as the inspiration for much progress. If happiness is supported by stability, thinking either Saturn or thinking Taurus. We had the stellium in Taurus. If happiness is supported by stability, it will wear down the stiffest barrier and win over the hardest heart. True joy is a beacon to the world. Being so rare, its presence is an indication of good fortune now and in the future. So we have a lot of tidbits to pull out of here. I'm going to put all this together here in a second. So we need to go into the sidereal solution first. So remember what the influence was? Limits, according to the I-Ching. So what's limits in astrology? It's going to arguably be Saturn. So we place Saturn here, especially on a day when the moon's whipping past it. And that's at 13 degrees, which puts us in Rave Mandala hexagram 19 and gives us the Capricorn solution. We're going to talk about all that in the summary slide. First, hexagram 19. It's the gate of wanting. The 19th gate fuels our social needs. It fuels the drive to make sure that the community exists and there is a place within the community for this energy. It is not about wanting or needing someone specifically. It is the energy to support and the need to have the support of the community available. Isn't that interesting that the I-Ching came out, the influence came out as limits and boundaries, and this is saying that the Raven Mandala is saying it is social, but it's not about limits, it's about making sure the support is there. It's not about getting the support, it's about knowing that it's there. It is the force which drives all revolutions. This gate, the gate of wanting, is a social gate fueling social needs, and it's about driving revolution. Whoa, that's pretty deep. So here is the line. It happened to be in line 6. That's where Saturn is right now. And so the avoidance of contact in general, but not exclusively. Remember the influence? It was trying to get you to create limits. What I'm saying is, don't be surprised if you feel these needs to be alone or to limit yourself. Reflect is the main influence. So let's read it. The fool on the hill, the sage, that if you can find him, will talk to you. The energy which generally fuels avoidance. We also have the downside of this energy, the sulking child, the self-imposed exile that will only end when it attracts appropriate and soothing reaction. Oversensitivity to rejection that fuels avoidance. So what this is saying is it agrees with the I-Ching influence, but we're going to extract the solution from this in the later slide. So let's go there now. Here's the summary slide. And this is for April 28th to May 5th. Excuse me. So this isn't suggesting that you need to go reflect and pause and be alone and introspect. That's not what this is saying, because this is the influence. The influence is you might be stuck in your own junk, in your own emotional remembering, in your own suffering, in your own pain, potentially. It doesn't have to be negative either. You could be round and round reflecting on past joy, but it's just sort of a pause period. It feels like a pause period, but the solution isn't necessarily to pause and reflect. So here it is. Just as in a review, the I-Ching 58 said joy. First, we need to have a solid sense of self. The joy and the self-discovery, we need to really discover self. Ironically, that only comes by pausing and reflecting. Find happiness supported by stability. Where's that stellium again? Taurus. Taurus is the stable one. And then be the beacon for joy. In the rave is the gate of wanting. This is the revolution channel. Tribal circuit, meaning that we need to be in our tribes. We need to feel supported. We also need to support. But not all you need. It's not about doing all that this week. It's not about supporting or getting support from the tribe. It's about knowing that the support is there. The energy to want and to give and to get the support of the community. Then we have the Sidereal Capricorn. He's ambitious, prudent, responsible, and goal-oriented. So here's the overall triangulation. If you put all these pieces together, here's what you get. It's a very nice interweaving this week from the influence to the solution, as you can see. The stellium in Taurus definitely aids the solution because it's about stability. Finding happiness and worth in that stability as well. Uranus and Sun together give huge insights of self-discovery, directly supporting I-Ching 58, which is the I-Ching solution, and ultimately finding joy. It's sort of the door that you need to walk through to find joy. Taurus also provides the stability needed. I promise you, I turned that off before, whatever. So Taurus also provides the stability needed to maintain the joy. Boundaries and limits are indicated in both the influence and the solution. Recognize the community, the tribe energy, and the need to finesse the right proportions of giving versus getting support, alone versus together, etc. The Capricorn sidereal solution reminds us that joy won't come to us. We have to do stuff to get it. It's not just going to float into our life. That's not where the joy is coming from. We have to do something. And so that goal is not just it's not so much setting limits. It's about discovering awareness of your place in the group. And in doing so, ironically, you'll probably find limits there or need for more boundaries, etc. But it's not about, this week is not about acting out boundaries. I'm sure most of us will have to have boundaries at some point. That's just your standard day. But this is gaining your place in the tribe. This is gaining your awareness of the support that you have from the community. And in doing so, knowing more about yourself, self-discovery, self-awareness, and hence getting joy. And then being the beacon of that joy from I-Ching 58. But we also, lastly, need stable foundation, which is what Taurus stellium gives us. But don't be stubborn. Don't be shy. Don't be pessimistic. That's all that Capricorn influence. The Capricorn solution. All right. That's all I got this week. I know this probably sounded complex, confusing, but it is all definitely interweaved. Go find yourselves this week. Know your place in the greater community, and ultimately tap into the very center, into the very depth of your being to find the joy, become the beacon, and that's it. That's the most that you can get out of this week in terms of self-achievement or self-actualization. And then the rest is up to you. Anything in the material world, that's going to be up to you. But it is sort of a rest period, or at least that's the influence. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll check you out next week.